collect calls from Rogue Valley East Correctional Facility. To accept these charges, please press 1.
Hey, Mom. I got something to tell you. I know I messed up, but I promise I'ma change. Just let everyone know that we the voices of youth justice, and we refuse to go unheard.
Department of Corrections at the age of 16. I was tried as an adult, I wasn't even 18. Just another young boy chasing a dream. Now I'm nothing but a young kid, forced to do a grown bid. Mom's crying in the court, this feeling makes me so sick. I've made some changes, but I doubt they'll ever notice. Judge, give me a chance. I'm just tired of feeling hopeless. I'm a labeled man, and I'll be forever living every single day, wonder when it gets better. Mandatory minimums, no second chances given. They say they locking up monsters, but they just condemning children. Seems the judge and the jury don't understand how we live it. Yeah, we made some mistakes, but we got hearts and mixed feelings, and we all want to change. We just need some direction. I sing these words from these pages in hopes that you get the message. To the people of America, we just ask for your blessing.
I've been locked up since a young one. Got me in these cuts, man, they ain't been no fun. Mama said she miss her baby, that just make my nose run. They don't want me to speak, want me to be unsung. Ay, I've been locked up since a young one. Got me in these cuts, man, they ain't been no fun. Mama said she miss her baby, that just make my nose run. They don't want me to speak, want me to be unsung.
We don't get no opportunities, communities betrayed us. Sometimes it feels like God slipped up and misplaced us. Mama told me that I need to calm down. Now I'm feeling stuck right here in this compound. Now I start to chill, but it's that got me tripping. Think about my sentence and my stomach start to flipping. Need to calm down, need to stop tripping. But it feels like this music is the only way they listen. I was in court, but I sang to the judge, spit my heart out that I wasn't just a thug. Got a family to love and things to overcome. So when I put down them drugs and I'll put down them guns, just wanna go home and get my son hands. Ain't no soul on this earth that can tell me about this struggle. Running up a check, but now the system is my hustle. Promised my mama that I would stay out there just trouble. Got out and went back and my sentence hit the double. Miss my baby girl and miss my boys' cuddles. Need to make a game plan and sit back and rebut.
And One Spirit Learning Alliance, welcome. My name is Salome Rahim. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm standing in tonight for Reverend Heidi Tessmer, who couldn't be here, although she very much wanted to. I am a One Spirit Seminary student, Grand Rising class of June 2022. I am encouraged to see all of you here tonight to engage in the continued conversation about not forgetting those who are behind the walls. Specifically, we're focusing tonight on our trans and youth populations and the impact incarceration has on families. It's one thing to read the statistics and see video clips on the news, but tonight we will hear from individuals directly who are affected and look at opportunities for action. One Spirit in Action, called OSHA, organized this event as part of our mission as the sacred activism arm of the One Spirit Learning Alliance. OSHA began in 2013, and I've been on the OSHA team since 2020. I'm delighted to be co-facilitating this event with my colleague and friend, Reverend Maggie Delia. Tonight, Reverend Lynn Liston will provide our tech support. Thank you so much, Lynn. She is a member of the One Spirit media team, as well as a member of OSHA. Reverend Lynn will now take us through some basic Zoom functions that you will need for this evening.
Hello, everyone. Just want to make sure you all know how to use the participants box, the chat box, how to use the chat to send me a message. Raise your virtual hand, and when we get there to the Q&A and you raise your hand, I will unmute you. And how to get into gallery view. Please, to find all of these functions, take your mouse and move it around the page, and you will see icons across the bottom. You'll see the participants icon. Click that for the participants box. Click the chat icon for the chat box, and that's where you can send me a message if you have any questions about tech. To raise your virtual hand, go over to reactions, click that, then click the raise hand button in the bottom of that box. And you can all do that now if you'd like, and I'll lower your hand. And to change into speaker view, which I highly recommend for this event, go to the upper right corner of your screen and you will see view. Click that, and you can click speaker or gallery. Gallery is so you can see everyone, but speaker is much better for this event so that you can see who is actually doing the presenting, who's speaking at any time. And with that, I will turn this over to Maggie.
Thank you, Lynn, and thanks for that information. The thing that's really clear is that this event would not be happening without you. So we really appreciate the work that you do to make sure that this happens. Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Maggie D'Elia. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a member of the One Spirit in Action community and a June 2021 graduate of One Spirit Interfaith Seminary. There have always been Indigenous people in the spaces we call home, and there always will be. And tonight, to pay tribute to the original inhabitants of the land we call home, I now offer a land acknowledgement out of respect and in the spirit of healing past and present harms. I acknowledge that One Spirit's center of operations, as well as the land that I live on here in New Jersey, are the ancestral homelands of the Lenape nations. I honor their ancestors and recognize the long-standing significance of these lands for them, past and present. I pay my respects to them and their ancestors as the original stewards of this land, and recognize the history of their genocide and forced removal from this area. I invite you to take a moment to silently acknowledge the original ancestors of the land that you stand upon, and invite you to learn who they are if you do not know. We'll take a moment now. Tonight, we're going to share statistics on the US incarceration rates with focus on youth and trans incarcerated individuals. I want to let you know how the evening will go. So before we hear from our panelists, we're going to take a look at those statistics. And this information that you're about to see is from the Prison Policy Initiative and the Women and Justice Project. So we'll have those statistics, then we'll have a panel and a Q&A section, and finally we'll provide you with resources to continue the conversation. On this slide, you'll see that there are over 52,000 youth that are confined. Most of those people are confined for nonviolent offenses, or often no crime at all. For example, there are over 6,600 youth behind bars for technical violations of their probation, rather than for a new offense. 3,600 refugee children and youths are held waiting placement with families or friends. An additional 1,700 youth are locked up for what are known as status offenses. Status offenses are behaviors that are not law violations for adults. They're violations that put them in prison for things such as running away, truancy, and incorrigibility. Nearly 1 in 10 youth held for a criminal or delinquent offense is locked in an adult jail or prison. and most of the others are held in juvenile facilities that look and operate a lot like prisons and jails. On this slide, you'll see that an inordinate number of trans and gender nonconforming people have been incarcerated. Trans, non-binary, and gender expansive people, particularly Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and especially Black trans women, are targeted, criminalized, and incarcerated at extremely disproportionate rates. 21% of all trans women in the United States, 10% of trans men, 12% of gender nonconforming people, and 16% of all trans and gender nonconforming people have been incarcerated. The records for these incarcerated trans, non-binary, and gender expansive people are routinely erased in government studies because gender is reduced to sex that's assigned at birth. No federal government studies provide actual data about incarcerated, non-binary, intersex, or gender expansive people. So in reality, there is only one federal government study that provides estimates. Their estimates are not actual data of the number of trans people who are incarcerated. The study's estimate of 4,918 people is likely a significant undercount. BIPOC transgender people are disproportionately harassed by police. Transgender Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been incarcerated at staggering rates compared to their proportion of the general population. 45% of Blacks, 30% of Native Americans, 25% Latinx, 21% of multiracial, 13% of Asian, and 12% of white trans population have experienced incarceration in their lifetime. That means that nearly 1 in 6 transgender Americans and 1 in 2 Black transgender Americans has been to prison. Once behind bars, discriminatory policies and the constant threat of sexual assault can make prison a living hell for this already mistreated group. But of course, these statistics can't tell the human story. And we are fortunate to have 5 amazing panelists who can. Our panelists tonight are Donna Hilton, Chardonnay Hope, Stephen Drew, Grace DeTrevera, and Leroy Weathers. We are so fortunate tonight to have these amazing panelists who can speak from their own experience on behalf of incarcerated youth and incarcerated transgender persons. Salome and I will be introducing the panelists one at a time, and we ask you to please hold all your questions until after the last panelist speaks. We have allowed time for Q&A, so please jot down any questions you have and save them until we start our Q&A. Following the Q&A, we will wrap up by sharing resources for taking action, and we will post a link in the chat, as well as email you that resource list so you can learn more about how you can make a difference.
It is indeed a pleasure to introduce Donna Hilton. She is a women's rights activist, criminal justice reform advocate, author, and accomplished public speaker. Donna spent 27 years behind bars, including 2.5 in solitary confinement. After her release from prison, she founded A Little Piece of Light, an organization named after her memoir, which advocates for the rights of system-impacted women and helps them re-enter society after incarceration. She is a founding member of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, and is also an alumna of the first cohort of Leading with Conviction Fellows of Justice Leadership USA. Donna, we are so glad you were able to join us for this first portion of the program. And we understand that your schedule will not allow you to stay for the Q&A, but we're so happy for the time that you could be here with us. Donna, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. I have to give a special shout out to Adele. Thank you so much for my mother, Sister Mary. And it's through that connection why I'm here. Sister Mary Nerney. I just wanted to say, you know, I don't come to these things with a prepared speech, right? I always go by the energy and the spirit, how the spirit leads me. And so I was listening to you, Maggie, you know, and you highlighting who this country incarcerates, right? And why. And so, you know, I just want to stay focused on that and why it's important for us to have conversations like these, but not just conversations, but actions to stop this, this disparity and also this egregious cruelty that continues on trans people, Black trans people of color, BIPOC people, women, young women. So I will get into that, but first I want to give you a little bit about myself. I'm Donna Hilton. I was trafficked to this country at the age of 7.5. By the 2 years later, by the time I turned 9.5, I was being severely molested and abused, traumatized by a man that I was now told to call father, and neglected and not supported by a woman who has now become my mother, even though I knew my mother. I come from the island of Jamaica, and so I knew my family well. And so I understand all too well how people are harmed and how people can cause harm based on that harm if it goes unchecked. And so the abuse happened until I was 14. I ran away. I went to school to tell a school counselor at 12. That didn't work out correctly. No one believed me. I became a liar, so I became shut down. I shut down in school. I was a gifted child, scholarships, being scouted for the Olympics. But meanwhile, home life was cruel and unspeakable things happening, right? And no one was listening to the little girl that was crying out for help. And so I ran away with a man that was 8 years my senior. I was 14, and he became my worst nightmare. And so I say this a little bit to say how things can continue happening in a child's life when no one addresses it. No one wants to see, because we usually know what's going on, but we don't want to see it. We don't want to acknowledge it. And so we deny that it is existing. We do other things like, oh, well, that's happening over there. That's them, not us. That's her, not me. You know, all these things that we do. And then we do it to children quite often, and that's wrong. And so what happens is we have a bunch of wounded, hurt people in our world, right? And then what we want to do after that is incarcerate them, right? We don't want to provide support. We don't want to believe them. We don't want to listen to them. And so we want to incarcerate. We want to incarcerate, lock up the problem and throw it away. But that hasn't been working. And so because of my walk and the walk of so many other women and young women that I met on my journey, as a result of my running away and I finally getting away from this older man, I was led into one thing after another, because I didn't have good adult support. Parental support that was non-existent. I didn't have any adults in my life that would help lead me on the right path or to show me, you know, it's not like I was a bad child, because I wasn't. I was an abused child, severely abused child, and no one wanted to help. And so it led me into making a wrong choice, right? No choices were good. People talk about choices that you have, and people don't realize that the choices people have usually are not so good, right? Especially if you come from areas that are so under-resourced and so neglected and denied, people don't really have many choices, right? But we want to criminalize the choices that they have or make for themselves when they don't have any other ways of being helped or getting help. And so even though that so much wasn't mine, but I was a child who did not have clear direction, did not have any adult supervision to help navigate and figure out this thing called life. And especially being in this world, in this country, excuse me, this country as an immigrant child of color. There are all these things to navigate, and I couldn't understand it as a child. And so, again, so I was caught up into a crime that I couldn't walk out of. And not having the support or the help, I had to do time. And I was sentenced to 25 years to life, and I served 27 years. And it was that journey that led me to understand that this country continues to point fingers elsewhere, but not look inside, not look at itself. And to see that the thousands upon thousands of women, right? Now, just be clear, when I went into the system in 1985, there were a few thousand women. In 30 years or so, we have increased the population of women inside the carceral system by a rate of 860%. So we went from 2,000 women in 1979-ish to now well close to almost 300,000 women. And we're not questioning the reasons. We're not questioning why. And so women will also include trans women, right? We saw the stats that Maggie presented. We saw that. Trans women, gender non-conforming human beings, right? Let's be clear, human beings. But we're not questioning why. People are being incarcerated and placed into the system because of poverty. Because of poverty. We incarcerate poverty, right? People that are impoverished. We incarcerate people for mental health reasons. We don't treat anything, we incarcerate it. We incarcerate people because of substance abuse issues. We're not treating it, we're incarcerating it. We're incarcerating people for all sorts of things, especially children. The stats on children that are incarcerated or detained is crazy. Maggie showed that as well. We have close to 60,000 children in detention or in prisons for being children. Black and brown children, when they so-called act out in school, are not spoken to or try, their issues addressed, or someone trying to find out, well, what's wrong? Why are you acting out? What's going on with you? The first response is call the police, call the police. Either lock them up or place some form of punishment on them, as opposed to just seeing them as children. Seeing them as children and seeing what's wrong, finding out what's the root cause, what's going on. There's a root cause to everything. A lot of our children are going to school just so they can have food, they can eat for the day. School has become a representation of just filling their stomachs, right? Getting just a meal. We should have no child going to bed hungry. None. We should not have children being harmed in the way we see. We should not have prisons and detention places for children when what they need is help, and they need to be heard and listened to. They tell you they're hurting. Maybe ask why. What's wrong? How are you hurting? Who's hurting you? And then believe them. Then believe them. But when it goes unchecked, things come one after the other, after the other, after the other. Yes, people do commit crimes and cause harm. But have we ever really stepped back and stood still and said, why? Why does that person cause harm? Why did that person do this? What we do instead, immediately point a finger and blame and to judge. And we take the humanity away from the person and not see that person as a human being, as an individual. We see them as a behavior, as an act. And then we want to come in as judge. And then so we don't even realize once we do that, once we start placing judgment, we have put ourselves in the position of God and made it okay for us to judge when we shouldn't. We don't try to understand the person. We don't try to understand the individual. We don't try to understand why this person is acting or has acted the way they've done. We don't really try to do that. We continue to incarcerate, and it's okay. And we know, those of us doing this work, that incarceration is just an extension of slavery. It's another form of enslavement. It's a response. It's a response to whomever wants to enact or say that a certain demographic of people are not worthy of, or valuable enough, or not seen as whole, as human beings. We should have no areas in this country that lack so much, that people have to steal, have to kill to survive, or think it's okay to do that because I have to do this and so I can be that, or I have to do this so I could just have. Or the mental health of a person is so damaged because of these things that they do things that are abnormal. But we're not looking at why. Again, all we want to do is incarcerate. I and those like me who've been incarcerated or are incarcerated for violent crimes are considered monsters. I'm not a monster. Never have been a monster, never will be a monster. I don't own that narrative. Who I am is a human being, a woman, a mother, a daughter, a niece, an aunt, a grandmother, a friend, a neighbor. I sit next to you in restaurants. I sit next to you in the movie theaters. I sit next to you on MTA. I walk in the street just like you. I am just like you. We are just like you. So before, like when we leave this space tonight, as I always ask people, and I say to people, don't leave this space and it was just a moment. You just heard some folks on the panel and it's over. It's not over. We're right here. We're not going anywhere. So I ask you, and I challenge you to see your place in this, in society, see your role in this world. And how can you help change the narrative? And how can you help me be identified as a human being? How can you help those? Help their voices be heard. There should no one should be voiceless. We all have a voice. No one should be voiceless. And if we continue to believe that people are voiceless, then we continue to deny the existence, the very existence of a person. So I challenge you to ask yourself, what can you do to help? What can you do to help change that narrative? What can you do to help us change a system or systems that have been created to cause harm? What can we do better as human beings? We are in a very dark place in this world right now. We've been going down this rabbit hole for a second. We can't afford to go down any further. We have to bring light back into this world. We have to bring light back into our very existence, into our being. And so I challenge you to make that happen, to start the process to make that happen. But I thank you for allowing me to be here. I'll stay on for a little while longer, but I really appreciate you.
Donna, Thank you so much. Thank you for your courage and the stand that you are for yourself and the people that have been imprisoned, and for illuminating what once you see it is very obvious, which is that we are all human beings, and we have forgotten some of the people who are part of our humanity. You know, it takes away from our humanity that we forget that. So thank you for being here and for what you had to say. I want to introduce now our next panelist, Chardonnay Hope. Chardonnay is a juvenile probation officer and a collegiate field hockey coach. She graduated with a BA in criminal justice in 2018. Chardonnay said that originally she hoped to make a positive impact on the world as a police officer. But after graduating, she quickly acknowledged that that was not the career path for her. In her role as probation officer, Chardonnay finds herself being a social worker, a mom, a sister, a teacher, a coach. Her commitment is to provide a positive support system for the youth that she serves, knowing that she can easily be seen as the enemy due to the current state of our criminal justice system. Chardonnay's commitment is to change that narrative. And we welcome you, Chardonnay. Thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. I just want to thank Megan Moore because we crossed paths through my other job, but I think it happened for a reason. So I used to love my job as a probation officer, but I think as I've come to terms with exactly people expect my role to be, it's kind of been hard to do. And after hearing Donna's story, that's exactly what a bunch of my kids have gone through. And I see them in fight or flight all the time, to the point where they end up in the adult system and they get labeled as unsavable. And I think there's a lot of pieces that people that are on the outside don't see. And I think that's exactly why I'm here today. And so basically my role as a probation officer is to oversee kids that were adjudicated on charges but that weren't sentenced to a detention center. When I started that role, I was like, this is great. I would pick my kids up, take them to school. I would go see them weekly, but I didn't realize that there was the potential that these kids had targets on their back, or were getting themselves in situations where they could reoffend. So then I became the person that had to make a decision that could change their life for better or for worse. So I started getting involved with court hearings, or getting involved with child protective services or other services that were supposed to be helping these kids. And I realized that they were not helping them at all. So I would have kids that would pick up charges, they would get adjudicated to a facility, and I'm thinking they're going to go to this facility and get treatment. Like, we're going to address their needs. They're going to discuss their home lives. They're going to discuss their mental health. They're going to serve their 6 months and everything's going to be great. And then I started to realize a trend where my kids would get out and I'm like, okay, like, you're back, like, let's get things done. Let's graduate school. Let's get a job. And then they would reoffend again. And I was just like, this is not making any sense to me. So in the state of Delaware, because our facilities are so understaffed, they actually had POs volunteer to work in the facilities. So it's like, oh, like, I have a great rapport with my kids. Like, I'll gladly do it. I'll go in. This will be a great way to just check on them without having to schedule an appointment. The first shifts I worked, I remember leaving, sitting in my car for an hour and emailing my boss, like, this is not okay. The way some of my kids were talked to, they were being bullied. Some of them were kept in their rooms all day long. Even just how the staff treated me, I was like distraught. I had specifically one kid, he actually took a plea. He was 15 to go to a level 5 facility, which is like the highest level you can go to, because his goal, he's like, I do not want to go out of state. I want to get home. I want to be around my siblings. I want to be able to see my mom. I'm like talking to my kid. I'm like, have you talked to like your treatment specialist, the person in charge of your treatment? Have you contacted your mom? Like, what's going on? How are you? And he was just like, no. Like, one word answers. When I used to in the community sit down with this kid and his teachers every day, and we used to hold conversations, and I remember saying to my boss, I was like, I need to get him out of here. Like, I do not feel right knowing that he is in this situation and he felt like he needed to choose this, or that he can't even talk to me anymore. And we still get mandated to work these shifts, and it just gets worse and worse every time, to the point where I'm like calling out because I do not want to be a part of that narrative. And like I said, a lot of the things Donna said are so true. These kids are dealt such crappy cards, and there's no one that is willing to help them. And like I said, there's so many services involved, especially within the community. Like, I can refer kids to mental health services, I can report neglect, and then at that rate, if these services choose to not cooperate or help these kids just because they may be labeled difficult to work with, or the families are uncooperative, they just give up on these kids. And then there's me, the probation officer, who, because these things could be court ordered, or because they're violating probation, I have to put these kids in a situation where it's, do they get another violation of probation charge, or do they go to a facility they don't have to be at? And like I said, we're sending them to these facilities that aren't necessarily good for their well-being. And I think I had to come to my senses a little bit, because I was kind of torn, like, being in this situation where I'm like, there are people that are telling their stories, and am I contributing to the wrong narrative? How can I, as a probation officer, make it so these kids aren't turning into what we call career criminals, or turning 18 because they're court ordered to be on juvenile probation until their 18th birthday. And then the minute they mess up because they were adjudicated, they get adult charges and they're sent to an adult facility as a child. Because unfortunately, in the adults, when a kid is 18, they're not a kid. To our system, they are an adult. And that's something I've been seeing a lot too. I have 3 kids right now that just because they were seen with the wrong people, or they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, because they're 18, they were sent to our adult prison. And even when I call there and I'm like, I'm their juvenile probation officer, I want to speak to them, I get laughed at, because they're like, there's no juveniles here. So my role as a probation officer, I kind of question it, because I want to help, but then there's moments where I'm sending these emails, or I'm calling out these other service providers that aren't addressing mental health. And sometimes I'm the one that's getting written up, or I'm being labeled unprofessional, but I'm like, we are supposed to be taking care of these kids. And ultimately, if they don't have parents, or there are parents that are involved, they just don't have the resources, we should be the next in line. And it's tough, because I know every state is different, but just from what I've seen in my small state in Delaware, I can only imagine how it is in larger states where crime rates are higher, or even larger cities. And I'm like, how in my small state, when we're not even catering to that many people, we have one major city, are we allowing these kids to fall through the cracks, but with no solution? And when there are people that have the power to make a change, that are addressing these problems, they're getting reprimanded. And it's so hard. Like I said, I met Megan through another organization. And I remember the guy said, like, but you can make a change, you can just speak up. And some days I'm like, even with the power I'm told I have, speaking up is just not enough. And I'm hoping that you guys have questions, because at the end of this, because I'll gladly answer any, because I think we need more people that know the ins and outs, like myself and everyone else that's been affected, to speak up, because I think people think we're ignorant sometimes, but when it's seen and when it's told by multiple people, I do think that can make a change. And I'm saying my role as a probation officer now, because I feel as though that there are probation officers that don't care as well. And as hard as it is to come home and answer calls at midnight or whatever, time of day after hours, I want to continue to do it because I can't leave my current role, whether this is my dream job or not, knowing that there are kids out there that feel unseen and unheard and are just so affected before they reach their adulthood, and it just carries on with them for the rest of their life. So like I said, I'm open to any questions at the end of this, so you guys can all have the same voice that I'm hoping that I have.
Thank you so much, Chardonnay. Thank you for the work you do. Thank you for your commitment, and thank you for being willing to come and share all that you shared with us tonight. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Stephen Drew. He grew up in a suburb north of Boston, Massachusetts, and went to prison at the age of 17 while he was only a junior in high school. During his time, he spent 20 months in solitary confinement. Since his release in 2007, he's been a motivational speaker to adolescents in his community. He reinstated his driver's license and went to school to become a CDLA truck driver and is employed by the U.S. Foods Company. He is married and lives with his wife and their 3 children, and he's in the progress of buying his first home. Stephen, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you all for having me. I'm so happy to be here again, and thank you for having me come for the second time, because it was great to speak on the first forum as well, and it was a really good feedback from it as well. So today I'm here to talk more about what happened as a young youth being locked up at such a young age, you know. So my mother kind of used it as a kind of like babysitter type thing, you know. She couldn't handle me. I was doing my own thing, running around, causing havoc, you know, doing the normal thing little teenage boys and young adolescents do at that age. So she got me a chins officer, and they followed me around, making sure I was home and not doing drugs and stuff. So I got a dirty urine for marijuana, and they decided to send me to a boot camp down the Cape in Massachusetts. So I went down there. I graduated from that after 90 days. They put me back into school. I didn't really learn much. I just learned how to yes sir, no sir people, and went back to hanging out with all the same friends and just doing all the same stuff I did before. Probably 90 days after that, I got arrested for possession of marijuana, and I got sentenced to a max 4 adolescent facility, which from where I'm from, I come from more, so it's like a white population. As you know, it's up in the north, it's close to New Hampshire, mostly white people. So now I'm going locked up in the cities where I've never seen anybody like other than myself as a young child. So I go in there and I'm scared and I'm afraid of everything that's going on or what's going to happen to me. As a child, there was nothing that they helped you with in the child facilities. I mean, all you did was hang out with people that were trying to learn how to do things better, how to get out and do it without getting caught, you know? So after going in and out of those programs, I went to that one for 9 months. I got out, and then I went back 60 days later for a dirty urine again. So instead of giving me a drug program or some more counseling towards the focus that I had a problem with, you know, and instead they just kept putting me away for a certain amount of time, letting me out, putting me away and letting me out. So after I turned 17, they let me out for good. And I don't know, probably like 45 days after that, I was locked back up into I went into an adult prison at that time, which I got 9.5 to 15 years for driving a car for people that robbed a store. So I was pretty much the guy that drove the car, and they said that I was the one that masterminded the whole operation. And 17 years old, I got sent away to New Hampshire State Prison. And then I had to get transferred for court back and forth to Massachusetts State Prison. So I had to go from Mass to New Hampshire over and over again. And I wasn't the best inmate at all. As a 17-year-old boy getting locked up in a man's prison, I wasn't the best person. So I did a lot of things that I shouldn't have done. And I got put into the hole for about 2.5 years. Like, it was probably about 24 to 26 months altogether. And it was a tough situation. More so that you don't really have the support of, you don't have anybody there for you, if that makes sense. You have yourself. You don't have anybody that's looking for you to help you help yourself, if that makes sense. They offer things, but they don't offer it to the right people. You have to be good. You have to do good things to get good things. And it takes a lot for people to do good things when they're treated like garbage, and a lot of so to get back to the child facilities, a lot of the child facilities that I ever went, they didn't, like, a lot of the staff members, they didn't treat you very well. You know what I mean? They looked at you as a number or as a paycheck. They're like a professional babysitter that kind of really doesn't want to be there, but they're there because they get a paycheck. You know what I mean? And you're just an adolescent that causes havoc and causes trouble to everything that they do. So they don't treat you very good. I'm kind of nervous and I'm going around everywhere. So for me to speak today, I really wanted to touch base on child advocacy for kids that are locked up, and they need different avenues to choose from other than just throwing them into a facility and leaving them there for 6 months and saying, all right, do you think you've been good enough now? I think it's time for you to try society once again. And then they just throw them back into society and think, hey, maybe they'll try better this time. It's not about trying better. It's about learning different coping skills for the traumas that you've had in your life. Not everybody has the same traumas. No one's trauma is worse than yours or mine or anybody else's. So I just wanted to speak, and I appreciate everybody listening, and thank you for having me.
Stephen, thank you. If you don't mind me saying this, when we talked the other day, you said at some point, you just said, the whole, I don't get what the whole is. I think a lot of people don't know what the whole is, but we know it's not good.
So the whole is like solitary confinement. That would be mostly, the only people that would know that were people that were in that forgotten community. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. The whole would be solitary confinement, away from everybody, locked down 24 hours a day. And the only person you hear is the voice in your head.
Yeah. And I know you said you finally got to a point where you said,
this
isn't working. I'm getting out of here.
I have to grow up. It's time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to give you a shout out about the wisdom of a young person, making that choice for themselves. So
it takes the person to make the choice.
Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for
thank you, Maggie.
Yeah. So now I want to introduce our fourth panelist, Grace DeTrevera. Grace is an LGBT liaison reentry health facilitator at Osborne Association. It's a social justice organization providing services for individuals and communities affected by the criminal justice system. In 2017, Osborne created the LGBT component with their wellness and prevention department in order to provide services. Grace was an important asset with the development of these services. In recent years, Grace has become a regional and nationally recognized advocate. Her platforms are on health disparities, policies which affect transgender, non-conforming, non-binary persons in prisons and jails. And for her, trans liberation, in everything human. And I have really enjoyed getting to know you over these past couple of weeks, Grace. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This agenda has been so necessary. I'm going to say that my journey has been more than just a success. Listening to everyone's story, I can relate because being not only a Black person, a person with a history of running away as a child, but actually coming into this work after doing 3 state sentences in New York State, the one thing that I can say at this time that we are doing this as a community. Could we hold on for a moment, please? Thank you.
I think Grace had somebody talking in the background.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry.
That's
Again,
okay.
what I wanted to say to everyone is that this work has become very transformative. And transformative to me is not the people who are there to do the job. It's those who are outside this work, our churches, our community centers, our mentors that are in the street. I listen to Chardonnay as a probation officer, and I see that you are mandated to follow certain directives that were placed there before you even came there. I'm always going to say this because this is the time that we're living in. We're living in a time now where everyone has the ability to reach for something and somebody that can be empowering to those in which we serve. It's unfortunate that that does not always come with the job duties, but to actually want to see the work that is going to be transformative for our youth and for our TGNCI people. I needed to say that because I don't want our listeners to believe that the policies are there to do anything other than run through the policy. This is where Chardonnays and even Stephen and other people who do this services feel, or not even feel, they know that they have to follow those directives and those policies. As a faith-based community, it is necessary that you go to your constituencies and your colleagues and those people who attend these organizations and agencies. Allyship is what has allowed people like me to exist, because I was written off, completely written off by my own behavior. So again, I can only say that this work is so empowering because now I go inside the prisons. And it's almost, I'm going to tell a really short story. When I got certified for this job, we actually go to the Bronx Supreme Court on the day that district attorneys are being taking their oath. And they take you to the judge's chamber, they take you to the court system. As they're doing this, it was time to go to the bullpens. You know what I mean, Stephen? It was time to go to the bullpens. And as I'm sitting there, I am walking through the bullpens with other lawyers. I am literally inside crying tears of joy because that was me on the other side talking to those who would come through, a lawyer, anybody. But to know that that was me and that now I can be of service and that they can see, wait a minute, I know her. She's been to prison. This is empowering people. This is where we're at as a country now, that we must have allyship with others. Nothing gets done completely by one territory of the community. We need everyone on here. Without doing that, the policies will stay the same. When you go to that voting box and you don't study that judge that you just elected because of a commercial, but you don't take the time to understand this is a judge who will send children to for-profit prisons, that will send trans people to solitary because they don't know how to deal with the medical, the social, or whatever. We must also understand that this is not, we are not in a catastrophe. There is hope now. You have numerous trans counselors, police officers, people who are working in the jails, at least in New York State. Those examples start the ability to start an allyship with a community that they may not know, may not be comfortable with, may not even want to be around. But these are someone's children. This is someone's daughter, someone's son. So it's not just us getting together as advocates, as workers who do this work. We have to reach outside of that. When you all go to church this Sunday, bring it up during the break, or when you're doing your tithes and offering. Understand what that tithe and offering means. Not just to support your church, but to support your community, that community of those children, that trans person who ran to New York in 1983 and ain't never left. So my thing that I wanted to express so clearly here tonight is that let's use our allies. Let's use those people who sit back and say, oh, that's so bad. Oh, that's so sad. It will stay that way. We must, as a community and as a faith-based community, we must do things that are innovative, that are empowering to all of us. I say this not as to chastise, but to give hope. To give hope. Because the system is the people. The system is the people. So I am just so empowered to just be in here with a panel of people who I couldn't have seen me doing any of this work in 2012. It was something to do because it was personal to me. I was being taken advantage of. I was seeing things that what I just knew wasn't right. So what did I do? I first educated myself while I was in those prisons. And what I do today, I go around this country and I talk about uncomfortable issues. I don't want to talk about the great things, because the great things are just that, great. I want to talk about why is a 15-year-old trans woman being placed in a solitary confinement because the system or some directive or policy has not been addressed. In 2017, we lost here a Layleen Polanco. She was placed on Rikers Island where she had a seizure, and officers laughed as she was having these seizures, and she died because she couldn't pay a $500 bail for a nonviolent prostitution warrant. These are not isolated incidents. Every year, this nation celebrates Transgender Day of Remembrance. Last year, we had to commemorate, remember, and if we could, celebrate 49 Black and Brown and Latino and Asian trans females and trans males. This does not have to be this way. You all have the ability, or should get the ability, to use your voting options. Find out who these people are who you are allowing to justify the continuance of inhumaneness. So as leaders here, as educators here, as probation officers, reach out to these organizations, some of these grassroots organizations that are in your regions, in your neighborhood. They will rally around you if it is right, and it is. So I say to this panel, we're going to continue to do what we need to do, but add allyship as your goal. You can all sit here and we can all do kumbaya all day long. Let's make allyship in these problems, in these situations that continue to harm us as a nation, harm us as people who have a belief system. You believe in God, Allah, Buddha, a rock, yourself. Go outside of that and use what you can do now. Don't be led by fear. Don't be led by, I can't do anything because of policies. Please, I ask of you all, those of you who are listening and watching and supporting this, please use your allyship. I don't need you to tell me that I'm worthy. I need you to tell that person who you know on the bus, in the grocery store, in the pharmacy, in the lobby of your church. Did you see that transgender on the Seagram's commercial? Are you seeing the young people out here and they're singing this rap music and talking all this violence? All those excuses to do nothing and keep things as they are. This does not have to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. What an amazing story and inspirational story, and so much you've given us. Thank you so much for being here and everything that you shared. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our fifth and final panelist, Leroy Weathers. Leroy worked 11 years for the New York City Board of Education at Rikers Island, preparing youth ages 16 to 18 for the GED. He taught at Wyandotte High School on Long Island and was an adjunct professor at the College of New Rochelle, Truro College, Bronx Community College, and York College. He's an active member of our OSHA team and a One Spirit Seminary student, also class of Grand Rising 2022. Welcome, Leroy.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. First, before I start, I just want to make two comments. Number one, the folks ahead of me, I wish I went first. Folks, it's hard to follow you guys. You guys did an excellent job. And the second thing I need to say, and I'm from the old school, but I need to let Maggie, Debbie, Salome, Lorene, and Megan, who's on the team. I don't consider us a team, but a family. But you ladies look lovely today. Just wanted to let you know, we need to have more panelists. First of all, I'm going to try to get through what I have to say very, very quickly. Grace, you were right on target. You were deep in what you were saying. I worked up at Rikers Island for 11, 12 years. And what I did is I prepared the adolescents for the GED. So before I begin, one of the things I did is I worked on their social skills. You know, one of the things that I expressed to them is that they're not criminals. You know, they're individuals who missed the target. They made a mistake. They committed a crime. you know, and I share with them, if you just got caught, I never got caught. I did things back in the day. Had I got caught every time I did something, I'd be doing beyond life. But then I remind them on a daily basis that they're men. And not to let anybody's opinion of you be your reality. And what happens is that when we look at ourselves, sometimes we come up with a different perspective. I'm quite sure a number of us have done things in life where it was against the law. You didn't consider yourself a criminal, you just made a mistake. Some of it might have been deeper, but you made a mistake and you're not a criminal. So I would remind them that every day, and I remind them that they're not in here by accident, it's designed, you know, it's designed. We live in a system that people of color, a certain group of people are in poverty, same group, race, uneducated, low on the economic line. I don't have to read books. Anytime a particular group or race of people are being targeted, it's racism, as simple as that. Now, one of the things I used to tell, well, the first thing I would say when I walk in the classroom is, if nobody told you they love you today, I do. And ain't nothing you can do about that. That's how we started off the class. And again, what happens is I worked on their social skills. And I would remind them that what they respond to with respect is fear. You know, let's say during the time when I was first teaching, they would walk around with their pants down. But when they get in front of a judge, they know how to pull it up and be respectful. That's fear. Just like Grace was talking about fear. And what I would say is that I'm not telling you not to respect fear. What I'm suggesting is that you respect more than you respect fear. Respect individuals that are treating you with love and respect. And we would talk about those things. And I also would remind them, I would put a handle on their name. I'm Mr. Weathers, you're Mr. Johnson. That's how we roll. And I reminded them that the system already knows if they release them into the same environment that they came out of, the chances that they come back is great. So what you do is you create a new environment in an environment. When you get out of here, if you want to continue your education, you continue your education. That's creating a new environment within an environment. If you leave here, you get involved with a church, that's creating a new environment within an environment. Because when they know that when you go back on that blizzard, the chances of you coming back is great. And anytime when somebody knows what you're going to do before you do it, they have you in check. Simple as that. You know, I need to say that sometimes I walk around down the hallways and, Mr. Weathers, if nobody told you they love you today, we do. Bottom line, that would be something great for them to learn to love themselves. I also would talk to them about the situation in terms of gangs and stuff. Now, I was the type of person, you know, I mean, churches are gangs, fraternities and sororities are gangs. What they need to do is change their policy. I say the Panthers was a gang. I was a member in Chicago, but change your policy. If you want to become a blood, you know, paint the church. Help Big Mama down the street with her groceries. Do things that are positive and not anything that's going to tear down the community. Now, I need to say, in all honesty, that I had a lot of problems with the COs, correctional officers. And many years I spent teaching in what they call the Bing at Rikers Island. I know Grace knows the Bing, that's solitaire. So I'll be knocking on doors. Yo, man, come on, let's go. Come on, oh, come on, Ms. Nutt. Get your raggedy butt up now. We're having class today. And so those are the things that we did, but it needs to be consistent. You know, now I need to say, and to be in all honesty, that a lot of these young men came from conditions I didn't come from. You know, I mean, foster care and different things like that. So I don't know what that's about, but it has to be a challenge. I've taught several students that when I was teaching when I came out of Rikers Island, I was still teaching. And while I was in Rikers Island, I'm getting the Q&A right now, but when I was in Rikers Island, a lot of guys that were in there and in foster care, their father was on drugs or their mother was on drugs about a block away. I don't know how to react to that. So I'm gonna stop on that note. I've been given the flag. And I really appreciate folks that spoke. And we just need to keep on keeping on. It's all about action. That's all it is. How they say, don't talk the talk, walk the walk. As simple as that. And I want to thank you so much. And I'm done, Maggie.
Thank you so much, Leroy. And I love you too. I'm so happy those young men had you there for them. So we wanted, I did sneak a little chat to Leroy because I want to make sure we have time for questions and answers. And Leroy is a good friend, so I knew I could do that with him. So, you know, if you have any questions or comments, you can raise your virtual hand as Lynn showed you in the beginning. And she'll allow you to unmute so you can ask your question. You can feel free to address your questions to a specific presenter or to all of them. And if you don't really want to raise your hand, you can write your question in the chat and Salome will read those as time permits. So if you have a question, just raise your virtual hand. Yes, David.
I'm not seeing David. I see Lorene and Cynthia.
Okay, I don't see his hand up now, David. Okay. Cynthia, how about Cynthia?
Thank you. I want to agree with everything everyone has said. You're all so generous to speak. I would like to know if the science about how the brain develops, particularly in young men, where we now realize that the frontal cortex doesn't really develop in young men until they're in their late 20s. Has this affected any of these systems at all? Has this gotten through at all? Does that make sense?
I think I can say something that, because I see this is going to go, your question is going to go into a direction that to me is above all of our pay rate. And what I would say to that is that regardless what someone says a symptom of certain behaviors are, or the symptoms of one's behavior, there are policy changes that will not allow anything ideal to change what's already there. So I believe that question would probably go to a conversation that would almost be not for this one, in my opinion, because we're frontliners. Stephen, we frontliners. Donna, we frontliners. So those questions, and Chardonnay, we're frontliners. We deal with, you know, I was telling Reverend Maggie this today. You know, I saw 6 participants today, because we don't use the medical term client at Osborne. And the one thing, 3 of them were just released from corrections. 2 were on probation as an adult. And with all of these resources that we have, compared to what was not there when I was going to prison, when Stephen was going to prison, when Donna was going to prison, when these people were providing these services, these things were not done, or at least not in New York. In New York State, in New York City, there's so many resources. Where I'm going to completely agree with Chardonnay is the policies of stepping away from stepping away from what your job duties are. You have to almost make a decision. And I'm sure Chardonnay goes through this by listening to her almost a testimony, that you have to make a choice. Your job, following your direction, and how can I make a suggestion that this isn't working collectively? Not only just the participant in which may be in front of you who may have that problem, but we know that these systems are not made on one-by-one issues. Everyone is put in a pot. So this is why I say use those resources as a probation officer, Chardonnay. You wouldn't be going around your duties. You need more resources where you are? I'll help you. I deal with parole officers, probation, court, all of that. There has to be some resources that you don't know about, Chardonnay. So that's probably why you're such handcuffed in your duties. Because if anything is going to help the system, we gotta stay within the boundaries of our duties. But we must also use the strengths of using things that are going to bring something to the table. Working for probation, you can go to your supervisor and tell them about a program that they don't know about. And what state are you in, Chardonnay? Is that Boston, you said?
No, I'm in Delaware.
Okay,
so
in Delaware.
So not to like interrupt you, but I agree, because we mention like outside resources all the time, like especially since I coach. I know like a big thing for me with kids is sports. That's what I did. That's how I stay out of trouble. So I always take my coach mindset, but I know specifically in Delaware, everything is calculated, everything is contracted. So how we were talking about the question of boys' development and frontal lobes, I know in Delaware, they use honestly a standardized test that we give every kid after they're adjudicated to determine their top needs and their top criminogenic needs. And even when we do that, it's yes or no questions. And I'm like, so you're asking me yes or no questions about what a kid needs or their level to reoffend. And
may I ask a question, Chardonnay? In the yes and no, are you allowed to make a summary?
No. And that's where I'm exactly. And I think that's where Delaware might be a little different, and why I'm kind of teetering between how I can help, because these things do get passed at the chain. We do surveys. I send up emails, and I don't know if it's just a lack of leadership where I might be more of a leader than my leader, where it's like, well, sometimes I send things and she's like, well, what do you want to do with this? And I'm like, not what we're doing currently. So yeah, I do sense sometimes I'm a little hesitant, but I'm like, I feel like I'm in a point where I'm the only voice of reason. So it's kind of like,
but don't let that discourage you. Let that empower you, Chardonnay. I want you to take that out of your system, honey. You were put there for a reason, not only personally because of the career that you have and that you obviously chose, but this ain't the time, baby, to excuse me, Chardonnay, this isn't the time to punk out, girl. This ain't the time. We don't need that. These children need you. Stop being about you alone. It should have been stop being about you a long time ago. Okay. So I'm saying to you that your hands are so tight. I just really wish that I had some legal knowledge of Delaware, because I know all the legal strangleholds of New York, Connecticut, Jersey. I got a degree for it. So my whole point that I want to say to that question, back to the frontal lobe and all those medical diagnoses, within those medical diagnoses, they're still growing. They're becoming adults. They still need the services that they're gonna need any damn way. So again, try in your best, Chardonnay, and anyone else who does this work, reach out to other organizations that are established. They may be a grassroots, and I'm sure Delaware has them. I do it all the time, and I'm staying in the boundaries of my duties. Lord knows I don't want you to do anything to get you terminated. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying do some independence, because if your heart is where your work is, that's what you must do, Chardonnay. It's not a choice.
Thank you, Grace. I'm not sure if I should be asking for another question or if someone else on the panel wanted to speak to that. Okay.
I just want to say really quickly, I'm still here, right? I just want to say really quickly.
You are still here.
Yeah, thankfully. Let's be careful we don't fall into that slippery slope where we get children to be categorized mental health and all these other things, and we miss the mark where it's not about the child and the child's needs, but it's about how people want to classify and identify that child, right? That's one thing. It's a hard fight when we're working for an institution that pays us, right? But we know we're dealing with human beings and little human beings, right? Little people who have needs, have issues, have stuff going on, but they've created systems and legislations, all these things to fit who they wanted to fit. And so oftentimes our Black and brown children these things are used against them, and then they're placed into these categories. And so they've lost their identity. They've lost so many things because now we've boxed them into something that is defined by others. Oftentimes, if we simply ask a child, what's wrong? They will answer. Ask them, what do you need? They might not know all the schematic, all those things, but they simply say, to me, I needed a key to my room door so it could lock. That if I was able to give that answer, they would have known something was wrong for me to want a key to lock my door, so I wouldn't be harmed anymore. You see how it can become tricky, and it's a slippery slope. So just be kind of mindful and present about that. That's all I'd say.
I was going to say, to add to that, I think it also comes down to the people we have in these positions to address these kids. Like, I don't do my job for the money at all. I don't. If I did, I would not be in the role that I am. And I think we have people that think this is a state job, so I'm going to do it because it's good benefits. So these aren't people, when you work in this type of work, you have to be a social person. You have to care about people. And I think the issue that it's coming down to is that people just don't care about people. So they are using these standardized practices to label these kids as mentally ill or high felony, high risk to reoffend, so we can divvy them out to the services and go on about our business, as where there are a select few of people that are like, these services aren't working. But when the majority is like, let's stick to the labels, that's the issue. And I think, like you said, we have to get out of that. They need to pay some of these workers more that care about these children returning to the communities and actually being able to live their lives. Because when you have people that are just like, I'm a probation officer, I'm a CO, I'm here because it's a state job, good benefits. I think, like Stephen said, it's a paycheck. It's a paycheck. And some of these kids get antagonized. Like, I have to force myself to get up every Monday when I'm told I have to work in a facility. It's mandated because they're so understaffed, because there's people that get there and they're so sick to their stomachs they quit, or there's people that are there because it's just simply a check. As where I go in there once a week and I speak to the kids and I'm like, I'm ready to get out of here after 1 hour. Like, are you okay? Like, and I think that's the issue. This is social work, it's criminal justice, but it's social work, and people don't see it as that. People just see it as a check and are fine with the easy ins and outs of, oh, that kid has a mental health issue, let's take him to mental health court, or that kid's high risk to reoffend, has picked up this many charges, send him to level 5 at the age of 15, and when he turns 18, that's the adult system's problem.
I want to say I'm like heartsick that I have to say that it's 8:27 and we have to stop the Q&A. Really, it hurts my heart. Maybe we need to have 2-hour panels in the future. If you have a question, if you write it in the chat, perhaps we can get them to someone from the panel to answer in the future. We have your email addresses. I don't think we have any questions in the chat. I just want to quickly let Salome let us know a little bit about the resource that we have to send to you if you would like to participate, as Grace and Chardonnay and Donna and Stephen have spoken to, all the organizations that we could be a part of.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, everybody, for that very rich exchange. There is at least one question in the chat, and we'll try to get you an answer by email. So there's so much support that's needed, as you can see, and hopefully you'll find a path of action that works, whether it's working directly with incarcerated people, working on policy and reform, or working through financial contributions. And to support you in doing that, in taking action, we're going to post a resource list in the chat right now. And we will also email it to you once the program is over in the days to come, of useful organizations that can help you take action. So one of these opportunities that we want to highlight that's on that resource list is Transforming Lives, New York. In March of last year, in partnership with Transforming Lives, OSHA launched a pilot program with 5 of its members to become writing mentors with incarcerated individuals in New York area prisons. This program is that there's a lot more to it. To being a writing mentor, there's more than I can say about how valuable that is. But if this is one of the several opportunities that you would be interested in just exploring, please reach out to Transforming Lives New York, and their information is on that resource list, but certainly any of the organizations that are on that list. Any ways that you can take action, any ways that you are willing to get involved will be very helpful, as our panelists have said. And now we must rush on to our closing up the program. We want to respect your time, respect our panelists' time. And so I just want to thank you all for coming, and I particularly want to thank the panelists. We were informed by your stories, we were inspired by your words, and we were encouraged by your messages of hope, despite all of the difficulties, as well as your call to action. So we are in deep gratitude, and we honor you for who you are, what you do, and what you've given tonight. Maggie?
I want to thank everyone for being here. You know, it takes, those of you who've been working on this notice, it really takes something. All of this work takes something. And it's really very inspiring to see all of you who've come out here to be in this conversation. And those of you on the panel, you know, thank you for what you do. And I don't leave me. You know, a lot of you, I've been in communication with you. Don't leave me after this. I love you. Thank you all. And you will get plenty of opportunities to participate, and we hope that you do. Good night, and thank you. And if you're on the panel and you want to stay to complete somehow, you're welcome to do that. And if you need to go now, that's fine as well. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.